How do we grow in love during this Lenten season? Here we have a description of love. 1 Corinthians 13 is this whole chapter-long poem on love. And then, following this chapter, we have a description of how we are to experience this love that is described in chapter 13. The very first verse of chapter 14, the very first phrase says, "This is how you experience the love that has just been described. You have to pursue love. Pursue it." You see, the love song comes to an end, and then comes committed action. I mean, we can say a love poem, we can talk all about love, we can play love songs, we can even sing along, but until we make a committed action step towards love, then we'll never experience it. You know, I know somebody said, I would find it so easy to love if so many people just didn't get in my way. Have you ever felt like that? But really, people are the point. You see, people is what love is all about. And love is not love unless we share it. And so today, as Paul encourages us in our text to express love and to pursue it, he's telling us that we have to think about the people around us. And there's one person that is foremost in Paul's mind as he shares, and that is Jesus Christ. Because Paul had lived a very loveless life. He was really religious. Certainly he practiced his faith. He did his prayers. He did all these religious things, but his heart was filled with hate until Jesus got a hold of his heart and set his heart free. And he writes in Romans chapter 5 this, that God has demonstrated God's love to us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And Paul experienced that personally, that while he was in the midst of living a life of hate, somehow God reached out and touched him through the love of Jesus Christ. Changed his life, transformed his life. And so for Paul, when he talks to us about love, he sees the very personification of love in Jesus. For him, Jesus exemplifies every one of the traits that he describes in this 13th chapter of his letter to the Corinthians. You could actually take the word Jesus and substitute Jesus every time love is mentioned. Jesus is patient. Jesus is kind. Jesus is not jealous. What is Jesus like? Meek and mild, not boastful. Jesus endures all things, protects all things. Jesus never ends. That's how Paul sees love. He sees Jesus as love in the flesh. And so he provides these words that describe love, and then he sees this love demonstrated in Jesus. And so for this season of Lent, we're going to be looking at these words of Paul, but also the examples of Jesus to try to explore and put into practice the relational principles of Jesus in our own lives. And this is hard. This is not an easy task. It can be very intimidating to try to love like Jesus has loved. C.S. Lewis actually describes the challenge of loving in the way that Paul describes and in the way that Jesus demonstrates this way. He says, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it up safely around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe and sound in a casket of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, your heart will not be broken. Rather, it will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. I agree with what Lewis has said. Love can be a scary thing, especially demonstrating the kind of love that is described here in our text and the kind of love that Jesus demonstrated in his own life. And I realize that not everybody is interested in following that path of love. My dad had a friend who was a fellow sergeant, and this buddy of his used to say more than once, he says, I'm looking forward to my retirement. I'm going to move to a place that is cheap, where I'm not going to have to work. I'm just going to live on my Air Force retirement. And I'm not going to have any of those Air Force officers to boss me around anymore. Any of you an Air Force officer retired? He was talking about you. And he said, I just want to live my retirement as a grumpy old man. I deserve it. And when I heard him describe his retirement that way, I thought, wow, I want to live just the opposite. I mean, I don't want to just close myself off in a casket of selfishness. I don't want that airless kind of life. I mean, I deserve better than that. He might think he deserves to be a grumpy old man, but I deserve better than that. My wife deserves better than that, really. She's the one that will have to live with me as I progress in age. Now, I know that there is probably some condition, some biological condition that produces the grumpy old man syndrome in some people. I know that happens, but I want to do all I can to not be that way. Not only does my wife deserve it, my kids deserve it. The teller at the bank deserves it. The lady at the grocery store deserves it. And so how is it that we make a commitment to pursue love in such a way that we get better and better all the time? Certainly we're not going to be perfect. I mean, I've been around the block enough to know that my attempts at loving like Jesus has loved me will always end up short. I cannot at all times and in every way demonstrate the same kind of love for God that God has demonstrated to me, and I suppose if I could do that, there'd be no need for a Savior. I have a Savior. It's Jesus. He's Jesus. And Jesus teaches me and shows me love and gives me love. And when I'm loved, then I can love others. Because I believe that hurt people, but loved people love people. And when we're loved by Jesus and we know we're loved, we become like Paul, a disciple of a heart set free. And we're able to love others. And we get better. Sure, we'll take one step forward, 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back. But the goal is, don't take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Take 2 steps forward, maybe 1 step back, but keep on moving forward. That's the goal of a life of love. I believe we can get to a place when we make a commitment, when we truly pursue love, we get to a place in our life where we're actually better at the end of our life than when we were younger. An old guy that I buried about 6 years ago, in my mind, he was perfect. Cindy, where are you? You know Bill? Yeah. Bill was a perfect guy. And I talk with his wife and I say, man, what is it like to live with such a perfect guy? She said, he wasn't always perfect. And I said, what about now? And she said back, well, he is pretty perfect now. Even that guy that was longing to be the grumpy old man visited me in my church in San Diego several years ago, and he's made a commitment to love. And he's turning out to be a lovely older gentleman. How is it that we make steps to really pursue love in our life? Well, one of the goals that we have in our adult education subcommittee of our Christian Education Board is to provide tools for you. And one of the things that's helpful for us in growing in a life of love is doing it together, kind of like the book of Hebrews says. It says, don't neglect the assembly of yourselves together, but stir one another on towards love and good works. And so what we're encouraging everyone to do during this Lenten season is join a small group, do this little Bible study together where we're looking at some of the themes that we're exploring in worship, and then apply these principles to your life in prayer, in discussion with one another, in reflection. And then as you meet together with other people, then you'll be stirred in your life of love. It's a way for you to make a commitment. Paul calls us to a commitment today. He's saying to us, pursue love. Will we make a commitment to love? You don't have to join a small group. That's not necessary if you're going to grow in love. But what is it that you can do that you will pursue love? If it's not a small group where you're going to work together with others to grow, what will it be? As we gather here at communion, I'd like you to consider Paul's invitation to us. It's really a rather intimidating call upon our lives to pursue love, the same kind of love of Jesus. And if we make that commitment, I'm sure God will bless us in many ways, each step of our life and forever. Would you take some time with me to go to God in prayer? And let's consider God's call on our life as we share in preparation for communion.